Hello Vogue Australia, I'm Leanne Moriarty and welcome to my book club. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the books that shaped me. Starting with the first book that I can recall reading and loving was The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton. I think what probably every child loved about Enid Blyton books is she was always sending the children off. The parents weren't there. And these children went off to the Magic Faraway Tree, which they could climb to the top, and there was always a new world at the top of the tree each time they went. I have to say, every time I sit down to write now, I'm trying to write the way I used to as a child, so without self-consciousness at all, just thinking of it as this is a fun thing to do. So I used to think I like riding my bike, I like writing stories. Then as I got a little bit older, the next book I can remember reading was the Narnia series. So the first was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And I'm not sure actually where this one came in the series, but it's The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And I think for many years I called it The Dawn Threader, but it's Treader. And it shows the extraordinary ability that I think children have to create entire worlds within their head. The next book that had a really profound effect on my life was written by my sister, Jacqueline Moriarty. When we were little, we both wanted to be writers. Our father used to pay us to write for him, and so he'd pay $1 for an exercise book filled with words. And then as we grew up, I wrote less and less until the day that Jackie called me to say that her first book, Feeling Sorry for Celia, had been accepted for publication. So although I was very, very proud of her, I was also filled with huge envy. So it was this book that finally inspired me to write my first book, 3 Wishes. Since becoming a writer, I don't think I've changed the way I read at all. I still very much read as a reader, and even if I catch myself thinking, oh, this is really good, or that's interesting the way they've done that, I actually make a deliberate decision to stop analysing the writing and to just read for the pleasure. So the next book, it's called Happenstance by Carol Shields. Carol Shields is one of my favourite authors. What was amazing about this was that it's the husband's story on one side, and then you can turn it over and it's the wife's story on the other. So they're both, and you can read it from either way. And I think it really got me interested in how 2 different characters can see the same situation from entirely different points of view. Next is The Accidental Tourist by Anne Tyler. And this was the first book I read by Anne Tyler. I mention her anytime I'm asked for the author who has the most influence on my own writing. Her books are deceptively simple. They don't have amazing plots, it's all in the character development. I honestly am not thinking about a possible adaptation when I'm writing, apart from when I wrote sort of a novella for season 2 of Big Little Lies, but that was not to be published. So putting that aside, when I'm writing, I'm creating my own world. Often I think people don't believe me, and my defence is that you'll find in my writing so often characters are thinking one thing but saying something completely different. Crow Lake I'll just speak about quickly because Mary Lawson is an author who writes in a similar way to Anne Tyler, again about ordinary people. It's the clarity of the writing that immediately takes you into the story. And I remember reading this book, Crow Lake, and thinking, this is just a perfect book. The Time Traveller's Wife is, again, one of my favourite books. Somehow, it actually made me feel as if time travel was real. And I'll never forget the last scene and just sobbing and sobbing. So that's a beautiful book. And finally, another one of my favourite authors, Kate Atkinson, Life After Life. I think she's a genius. This book it's not really time travel, but it's one day repeated over and over. And reading it just gave me such a sense of movement. So Here One Moment is my 10th novel, and it's the story of what happens on an ordinary domestic flight out of Hobart, and towards the end of the flight, a very ordinary woman who nobody has taken much notice of begins to point at every single passenger and give an age and cause of death. And so it's the story of what happens from there. Thank you so much for joining me at my book club. I hope you enjoy Here One Moment, which is available right now wherever you buy your books.